All right, Amanda, that's the blue button you need to click.
All right, admitting folks now. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I will be brief. I just want to say, on behalf of the Dallas Public Library, thank you for joining us. We're so thrilled to have the Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability Office with us today, and also partners to share some great information. Just a couple housekeeping notes before we get started. First of all, this meeting is being recorded. Participants will be muted so we can keep the focus on our presenters and all the great info they have to share with us. So if you do have any questions, put them in the chat and we will relay them to the presenters at the appropriate time. Also, we are recording this program and posting it to our YouTube page where it will live. So if you don't want to be recorded on camera, just keep your camera off. Or if you are uncomfortable with that, you can just watch the program on YouTube at a later time. So with that in mind, I will pass it over to Helen, who will share a little bit of information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jordan, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Helen Dulac, and I'm with Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability, and I pulled up the wrong presentation. We are really, this is the Earth Day Everyday session, and we partner with the Dallas Public Library to bring you these wonderful programs. And I just want to give you a brief introduction because you've probably not heard of Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability. We were formed back in 2004, but back then we had a different name. It was the Office of Environmental Quality. We worked really hard for 4 years to help Dallas become the very first city in the United States to achieve a special environmental certification called ISO 14001. This is really familiar to different kinds of factories and different establishments that produce a lot of things. But what's another amazing thing about this is that we're talking about Dallas, Texas got a special environmental certification, and we actually get audited every year to keep this. So this is Dallas, not Denver, not a city in California, not Austin. This was Dallas that did this first back in 2008. So we do have a history of being green, and with your help, we can be even greener. Let's fast forward 10 years to 2018, where a lot of changes happened to this department. There was a restructuring in the city, and several environmental programs and operations were added into OEQ. So to reflect that change, we changed our name. That's when we became the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability, or Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability. Also that year, we created a combined outreach and engagement team that I'm a proud member of. And then the following year in 2019, Mayor Eric Johnson created a special committee of the Dallas City Council just focused on the environment and sustainability. They meet the first Monday of every month, and those meetings are broadcasted, and you can watch those. It's a great way to see the green pulse of the city and hear about new pilot programs coming up. Now, if you have heard of our department, it's because on May 27th of 2020, the Dallas City, pardon me. There you go. My dog's really excited about this. It is the passage of the Comprehensive Environmental and Climate Action Plan. That is our roadmap for the next 30 years on how we're going to mitigate climate change and improve the quality of life for everyone in Dallas. And as we move forward for the next 30 years, you'll see lots of things coming from the city that align with that plan, including presentations like this series. So I mentioned that our group doubled in size back in 2018. Those three groups you see in green are the ones that joined us. And I want to talk about one of those just briefly, and that's stormwater. And I think our speaker might touch a little bit on this today also. So when we had that rainstorm just the other night, any water that was not absorbed into the ground, anything that ran off of your yard or off your driveway, that is called storm water. So it's basically another word for rain. That storm water eventually makes its way into the street. It flows down the gutter all the way to that big drain at the end of the street, which is called a storm drain inlet. And it's there for one reason, and that's to make sure the streets don't flood. Now, what happens is all that rainwater or stormwater goes into the inlet, and then it goes into a creek, and eventually into one of our lakes or the Trinity River. Nowhere in that cycle is the water cleaned or treated. So that means that there's any pollution in that stormwater. If it's litter, if there is bacteria from pet waste that wasn't picked up, if there is automotive fluids that came from cars that are parked in the street or on driveways, that's how a lot of pollution enters into our waters. And also the Trinity River flows an additional 500 miles from Dallas all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. So pollution from our neighborhoods, from our homes, even from our city can actually end up with the dolphins in the Gulf of Mexico. So please just be mindful about what you're doing outside. Try to pick up that pet waste and also don't litter. And that's going to really help water quality for us and people along the Trinity. I mentioned the outreach and engagement team that I'm a member of. Well, we want to empower Dallas to save the earth. And we do that by offering virtual presentations like this and also in person when we're allowed. Currently, we can do virtual presentations for your HOA, different clubs and organizations that are in Dallas at no cost. We also have a lot of materials for students anywhere from K to college, and we can also participate in some seminars, activities, and events. And as things start opening up, we can start doing in-person presentations. And if you invite us to talk, what do we talk about? Well, we talk about environmental topics from A to Z, all the way from air quality to zero waste. We also host some of our own events. And one of the big things coming up starting April 1st is the Wyland Mayor's Water Conservation Challenge. All you need to do is go to this special website, take a pledge that you're going to conserve water, and you will, especially after you learn a lot about that after today's presentation. And then you can even win free gifts, and there's even a component to help a charity. That's going to start April 1st to take those pledges. So please keep a lookout on that on our social media. And speaking of social media, you can find us at Green Dallas TX on Facebook and at Green Dallas on Twitter and Instagram. And we have a website called greendallas.net that you can visit for more tips and information. And also that's where you will find the event request form that will, that's the way you can invite us to participate in your events. And so with that, I'm very excited to introduce our presenter today. We have Amanda Griffin, who is the president of Smart Outdoor Services. And she is a true irrigation and landscape aficionado. Let's see here. She started the company because she identified a real need for active water management and impactful water education. She is energetic and passionate about the topic of smart water solutions. She holds 2 certifications in landscape irrigation from the International Irrigation Association. She is a certified irrigation contractor and a certified landscape irrigator auditor and an EPA WaterSense partner. And she's worked in the green industry for 13 years. So Amanda, please share your screen, and I cannot wait to hear what you have to share with us.
Thank you so much, Helen. Wonderful. I realize my bio's about 4 years off. I'm approaching my 20th year. It's easy to remember because it's about the same age as my youngest daughter. So she's growing up and I am too. So let's get right into this presentation this morning. I'm excited to be here and talk to you guys about irrigation. I'm sharing some irrigation secrets with you to help make you a more savvy irrigation consumer. So let's get started. Helen told you a little bit about me. I do want to, well, if I can advance, let's see. I'm clicking advance like I did before and it's not, oh, there we go. Okay. Helen told you a little bit about me. Some other things that maybe you'd like to know is that I used to be a certified teacher, which is why I put education as such an important tenet in our company, because I love to teach. It is my first love, and I realized that there was so much that the general public and the principal users of irrigation really didn't know when we first got started. Our company began before the famous drought of 2006. So even at that point, before the jargon of irrigation efficiency and water conservation was really popular through the public relations campaigns that the cities and the water purveyors were so good to put together during those drought years. My company was teaching those things ahead of the drought. And then once the 2006 drought came in 2011, people just really adopted this new water ethic and really got interested in saving water. So our company specializes in water management. We're not just a regular old irrigation company. We do system evaluations and regular inspections and make recommendations for irrigation renovation to make systems more efficient. We want to save water. That's our primary goal. So if we can do that by helping someone, or if we can do that by giving someone information, either way, those drops count. So we are excited to be a part of this today. And we're definitely certified sprinkler nerds. I always tell this story. When my daughter was about 6 years old, we sat down at the table to eat dinner, and she said, "Okay, what are we going to talk about else than irrigation?" Because my husband and I were talking shop all the time. So she put the kibosh on that, and we talked about something else. But we're definitely sprinkler folks all the time. So today we're going to go over the basics of an irrigation system. I'm going to show you some of those things that if you have an irrigation professional come to your house, these are the things that they're looking for, they should be looking for. And I'm going to talk to you about what each type of component on your irrigation system does. We're going to talk about how each of those can lend themselves to water management. And then we're going to talk a little bit about troubleshooting. I'm going to cover a little bit more troubleshooting in our next segment, along with some really good specifics about creating a really good irrigation schedule with your controller. So tune in for that next class on April 8th. But today I'm going to give you a great foundation so you really understand what your irrigation system does. So let's take a look at this slide here. It's a typical irrigation system. So we've got our house there in the middle. You can see the water source. It's typically, your water meter is typically in front of your house on the street or maybe in your alley. You've got your backflow prevention device that's really important. That keeps, keeps all those potential chemicals or pet waste that are in your yard from potentially flowing back into that water source. So just like the stormwater tips that Helen shared at the beginning, the backflow prevention device is really an important piece of your irrigation system that not a whole lot of people talk about. But we sure start thinking about backflow prevention when we have things go wrong, like our recent snowstorm that caused so many cities across Texas to have problems with their pumping systems. And a lot of cities that ended up with boil notices. So when you get a boil notice from a city, that typically means that something went wrong with some kind of backflow prevention. And we can all do our part by keeping that backflow prevention device in good repair. We've got pipes coming from our water source and our backflow prevention device that leads all through your yard. That pipe from the backflow device to all of the valves here in your yard that I'm pointing at here, that is called mainline pipe. We're going to talk about that a little more specifically here in just a little while, but it's important that you know the difference between mainline and lateral line, because if you have a leak on one of those areas of your system, there's a lot more criticalness to a mainline leak than there is to a lateral line leak. So I'll explain those here in just a little while. But moving through our diagram here, we're following the water from the backflow device down the pipe. You guys can see my mouse, right? Can you see my mouse as I'm pointing to things? Helen?
Move it around a little bit more, please. I'm not seeing it.
I'm right on the black house there. Can you see it?
I am not seeing it. Try, if there's a small menu in the bottom left-hand corner of your slides, there's one that looks like a wand. Try touching that, clicking on that, and see if it makes it more obvious.
Okay.
Like if you kind of hover in the bottom left corner of your slides.
Yeah. Now can you see it? I selected mouse. So, 1 second here. Let me see if I can.
Well, while Amanda's doing that, I have something special to announce. We want to thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. So we are offering free thank you gifts to everyone who joined us today. To claim yours, all you need to do is send an email to greendallas@dallascityhall.com, all one word, greendallas@dallascityhall.com. Include your name and your mailing address, and we will send you a free thank you gift. And I will drop that in the chat. It is greendallas@dallascityhall.com.
Okay, I think I've got it.
Oh, we see it.
Wonderful. Okay, there's my laser pointer. Perfect. This will help us go a lot faster because I can point out the things that I'm referring to. So we've talked about our water source. That's your meter from the city. We've talked about our backflow prevention device. We're following this solid line, taking the route that the water takes from your water source to your irrigation zones. So these blue circles that I've got here indicate your different irrigation zones. So an irrigation zone is just all the sprinkler heads in that particular area that service the plant life in that area. So we've got our mainline pipe that runs here to a zone valve. However many zones you have should be however many valves you have. So if your irrigation professional talks about a 6-zone system, that means somewhere in your yard there are 6 of these valves, which we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about in just a few minutes, in your lawn. The water pipes that come from the valve downstream to your different emitters in your zones, that dotted line here with the red arrow, that's lateral pipe. Okay, we're going to talk about that also here in just a few minutes. But I like to show this diagram because I think it helps make sense of a system that you mostly don't see. It's all underground, so sometimes it's kind of hard to understand how it all works. But this is the hydraulic parts of your irrigation system. So let's go to the next slide and talk specifically about our emitters. So I'm taking you from the end of your system back to the beginning. We're working our way back. So first thing we're going to talk about is emitters. And emitters are basically just where the water comes out. Okay, so there's several kinds of emitters. We've got rotor heads, spray heads, micro emitters, and drip are also considered emitters. We'll talk a little bit about drip in just a few minutes. There are a lot of options in your emitters that can help you save water. The technology in irrigation has evolved to support water efficiency so much in the last 5 to 10 years that even if your irrigation system is just 5 to 10 years old, there's probably opportunities for you to retrofit some of your components and save water. I'll give you an example. We retrofitted a system recently, a large HOA, several zones. We put pressure regulated rotors on those zones. So we took the old rotors off, we put the new pressure regulated rotors on. We ran a pre-test to see how much water those zones used before our project. We ran a post-test to see how much water those rotors use post-project. The savings was 34%. Those zones ran 34% less water with retrofitting just the rotor heads. So, emitters seem like a pretty benign, basic part of the irrigation system, but utilizing that new technology can really mean a lot of savings. Just think about what your water bill is in June or July, and then think about taking 30% off of that. That's a great option. To use water more efficiently and save on your water bill. So I've got some pictures here of different emitters for you so we can learn the difference between them. The spray head here in the upper right picture is the most common on most yards in the city of Dallas and in the Dallas area. That is a head that pops up when the water zone, it comes on that zone, and it sprays a distinct pattern all the time. It might be a half circle pattern. It might be a full circle pattern. It might be somewhere in the middle. It might be adjusted down to a quarter circle. That's your spray head. Those are typically in smaller turf areas and flower bed areas. Shrub areas typically have spray heads on them. They're among the most common. If you have larger turf areas, you might have rotor heads on your system. Rotor heads are heads that pop up and they spray a stream of water that moves. So it's going to rotate around and spray to the left and spray to the right. Rotors are adjustable, so you can make them spray almost a full circle to just a very little skinny piece if you've got a skinny piece of turf. The adjustment on them works a little bit different than a spray head, but they are adjustable. And you can see this little red part where the water comes out. Those are nozzles in a rotor. And a lot of people don't realize that those nozzles can be changed out. And you want to customize that nozzle to your specific water need so that you're putting out only the amount of water you need, and you're matching your precip rate among all the heads in your zone. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I also love this picture on the left, and I love to share it. These are rotary nozzles. So this is a spray head, just like this guy over here. It pops up. And it has a small shaft that pops up, but these nozzles are specialty nozzles, and they actually rotate. A lot of my clients love them, and they call it the water dance, because those nozzles go around in a pattern. They're also adjustable to a specific area. They apply nice fat water droplets that are not as susceptible to wind drift. And they can be used in a variety of applications, especially in turf areas where you really need to maybe water a little more space than your head spacing was installed to cover. So we'll talk about specialty nozzles in a minute. But all of these emitter types, the rotor heads and the spray heads, are available in a pressure regulated version. But you might have to ask your irrigation professional specifically for a pressure regulated version. They have plain old, cheap heads that aren't pressure regulated. And then they've got heads that are only slightly more expensive that pressure regulate. And so what the pressure regulation feature does is it makes every head on the zone, from the first one that's right next to the valve to the farthest one away in that zone, water at the same pressure at the same time. So what that does is it makes more efficient, it makes more consistent the amount of water that's applied in that zone. If you don't have pressure regulated heads and you have especially a high pressure situation, most homes in the city of Dallas have typically pretty high pressure, higher than most irrigation components are designed to perform under. So that's why pressure regulation is such a serious savings option, because it can actually reduce the amount of pressure that is coming out of the head compared to a non-pressure regulated head, and it makes that whole zone consistent. So if you were to put your tuna cans out in that zone and run that zone with those pressure regulated heads, you should have a lot closer to exactly the amount of water from the first head to the last head. Something important to remember when you're retrofitting emitters, especially if you're switching to pressure regulation, is do the whole zone at once. Okay, don't just do one head or two heads. You'll get improved performance in those heads, but the rest of the heads, you're going to create a consistency, a uniformity problem, because those two heads will be performing like a pressure regulated head, and all your other heads are just still going to be spraying all willy-nilly. So the most efficient option is to retrofit that whole zone at once. Now, I would say that as long as you're being mindful about it, you can go ahead and retro your heads as they fail with pressure regulated heads. But probably if you do it that way, you're going to want to replace those others a lot faster than you normally would, because you're going to see the performance difference, and you'll really reap the savings by retrofitting the entire zone at a time. So, if you have an irrigation professional, let them know you're interested in pressure regulation. They can give you some costs to do that. Typically, it's a relatively easy retrofit. The challenges that can make it more expensive are how old your sprinkler heads are now and how much below grade they are. Having a sprinkler head installed, you can see on this picture with our rotary nozzles, they are popping up full 4 inches above the grass. That means when those heads pop down when the zone is over, those heads are right at the grade of the soil. So that's what you want in a spray head. Over time, thatch and soil build up, the zones settle in. So over the years, heads will drop below grade. So typically when you're doing a head retrofit, you want to do the whole thing at once. You want to combine that labor charge, dig up that head, put it back to grade, and then retrofit it with that pressure regulated head. Put the smartest nozzle on there, the correct nozzle for the application. But I tell people, even if you don't switch to some kind of specialty nozzle, just putting a new nozzle on your heads will increase your efficiency, because technology has improved so much in the last 5 to 10 years with nozzle technology. And over time, nozzles begin to wear out. Their patterns get disrupted. They can get clogged with debris in the line. So new zones, even if they're just kind of basic nozzles, new nozzles, they will improve your performance, even if they're not fancy specialty nozzles like these rotary nozzles. But, I tell people the bits and pieces that we use as irrigators, it's all little pieces of plastic. And so the price that you're paying for an irrigation upgrade or an irrigation retrofit or even an irrigation repair, the cost of the part is so small, but being able to pay someone with the expertise to use the right part in the right place is really what you're paying for with irrigation service. So, to switch from the very cheapest nozzle to a more efficient upgraded nozzle, you're looking at, just a couple of dollars per nozzle sometimes. So, I would say buy the most efficient technology you can afford, and it's going to help you in the long run. So, I got ahead of myself a little bit. Here's my slide about nozzles. I do want to talk about rotary nozzles that I showed you before, and then another kind of nozzle called precision nozzles. The other great thing about nozzles is they're so inexpensive. They're easy to retrofit. You can retrofit nozzles yourself because you just screw them off and put them back on with their filter. So, they're a very inexpensive way to upgrade your system or create a corrective situation for your system. So if you have an irrigator that comes over and says, well, this zone really doesn't have enough heads on it, but you don't really have enough pressure to put more heads, sometimes you can retrofit the nozzle and it will make the head need less water to perform the same job. So nozzles are an easy way to take corrective action on a system that needs help. There's my note: replace an entire zone at one time. You're going to get the biggest bang for your buck to do that. There is a kind of nozzle called an adjustable nozzle. A lot of repair guys carry adjustable nozzles on their truck because they're so easy that one nozzle can be a full circle or a quarter circle, but those are the least efficient option. So just know that they're there. Sometimes you need it because you have a strange little slice that you're trying to water or a very tiny bed and you need that adjustable nozzle. But just know that even the most efficient adjustable nozzle is less efficient than a plain nozzle. So if you can use a non-adjustable nozzle, that's the option you want to ask for. But sometimes you just have to have that adjustable nozzle because that's the only way to eliminate a bunch of runoff on hardscape or something. So the valves in our system, I call them the mysterious controllers of water flow that are really not that mysterious. So you should have one valve for every zone in your system, and they're electrically actuated. Now, if you have one of the original irrigation systems in the Dallas area from 60 years ago, you could potentially have valves in your system that are not electrically actuated. When John and I first started doing irrigation service, we found a lot of these valves still in the ground. And, frankly, a lot of them were still working. At that point, they were 40, 50 years old, and they're not electrically actuated. If you have old valves like that, you're going to want to choose your irrigator carefully and as you transition from those hydraulic valves to electrical valves. But valves are pretty simple. They are controlled with electricity, which we'll talk about electricity in your system in just a little while. It's one of the least understood parts of the irrigation system because you just don't think about it. You turn sprinklers on and water comes out, so it's a water related system, but the electricity is a critical component to a successful irrigation system. We'll talk about that a little bit. I wanted to show you guys a valve because so many times your valves are already in the ground when you're looking for them. So, you just see them from the top. You see this little area right here, and it's hard to know what you're looking at. The other thing I will say about valves and valve boxes is a lot of times valves get buried, the valve boxes get thatched over with turf, and you can't find them. If that's the case, irrigators have a wire locating equipment that they can typically find your valves for you. But I did want to talk about the parts of a valve because sometimes when you are troubleshooting a problem on your system, you'll need to go to a valve and you'll need to kind of know what you're looking at. So these are two different valves here. This valve is a non-flow control valve, and this valve is a flow control valve. You can see that at this valve here, it's missing this critical piece here. There's nothing wrong with this kind of valve. It's sort of an econo version. If you have this kind of valve, it's not atypical. Especially if like your builder put your system in, or you were really price conscious as you were budgeting for your irrigation system, you might have these non-flow control valves. This flow control handle, this allows you to turn this valve off manually from the field. So if for some reason you don't need water to come out in that section, you can turn that off here at this flow control handle. You can also make minor adjustments to the flow of water to your zone using that flow control handle. You can turn the zone on and dial that flow control and watch the performance of your heads change. And in that way, you can make some minor adjustments to the water coming out of your emitters. Every valve has a solenoid. Here's the solenoid on our flow control valve. Here's a solenoid, looks a little bit different in the non-flow control. They do the same job. They're the part that marries the electrical part of the system with the hydraulic part of the system. When it's time for this zone to come on, the controller will send an electrical message through the wires and tells that solenoid to activate or to actuate. That solenoid gets actuated, it lifts the plunger, and that diaphragm inside this valve piece right here lifts, and then water flows through the valve. Okay, I want to show you guys this little piece right here, and over on this non-flow control, it's this piece here, because if you're trying to figure out why you have an irrigation problem, sometimes you may want to turn on a valve manually. When your irrigator talks about turning on a valve manually, that means he or she is going to the valve in the field and they're turning this little thing here, or they're turning this little handle here, and that falsely actuates the solenoid, or it bypasses the solenoid. So that in that way, you can turn your valve on without the electricity. Now, be very careful doing this, because you don't want to forget about it, because that valve is going to be on until you come back and turn this off. But it's an easy way to manually turn that valve on and go, okay, well, water's coming out, so we know that we have water to this area. Our problem with our sprinkler must be electrical. Or, you know, we can turn this valve on. Sometimes my technician will turn a valve on if we arrive at an appointment and our client's not home yet, or, you know, they're going to meet us. They can go ahead and get started turning on the valve and see if there's leaks in that particular zone. So, you know, these will be in the ground. I've got a couple of pictures of valves in the ground for you. This is just another image of a different valve. I like to show different ones because there's all different brands, but basically they run the same way. This is talking to you about how to turn a zone on manually with the solenoid. You can do that, but I don't recommend it because it's really easy to cross thread those when you're screwing the solenoid back in. And I would just leave that alone, because you've got your manual bleed screw. That's the point of that part on the valve. And you can use it to turn on that valve manually. A lot of people don't know that, or they're just afraid to poke around in that box because they don't know what all that stuff is. And when you see those electrical wires, you get kind of worried, like, well, am I going to shock myself? You're not going to shock yourself. Even if you're touching the valve when that zone comes on from the controller, it's not going to shock you. I do want to point out, see the screws here on the bonnet of this valve? Most irrigation valves can be taken apart and the internal parts put back in or replaced. And we call that servicing a valve. Servicing a valve is frequently a lot cheaper than cutting out a valve and replacing it. So in the effort of making you a more savvy irrigation consumer, I want you to know that, you know, if you have an irrigator that says, well, your valve has failed, ask them if it can be serviced instead of replaced. It will save them time. A smart irrigator is going to be about it all day long, because if he doesn't have to dig a bigger hole and cut pipe and glue fittings and all those things, he should be happy to service your valve if it's possible. Now, there are times when a valve will crack on the bottom, or the bottom part of this valve gets damaged in some way or run over, and then, you know, you've got to cut out the valve. But a lot of times valves can be serviced, and I think sometimes irrigators just default to cutting it out instead of thinking about servicing it. So I would always ask if the valve can be serviced instead of cut out. So here's a good picture for you of your pipe in the ground. So this is a part of a system that's being put in. Actually, this was a photo of a repair. So I want to point out what we're looking at. This is a valve here. This is a valve. You can see that there's wire going between them, and then this wire keeps going here in the box. So we've got wire leading out. The red arrow is pointing to your lateral line. The water's coming out of the valves. Well, actually, this is still main line. The water coming out of the valves and going through the dirt, that's going to an emitter. That's your lateral line. If you get a break in a lateral line, when that zone comes on, you'll see evidence of that leak, okay? If you get a break over here, and the reason I use this picture is because it's showing main line and lateral line in the same hole, okay? This larger pipe here is your main line. If you get a main line leak, unless you have a master valve, which I'll talk about in just a minute, that water will be running all the time. That's when you're looking at getting a $600 water bill if you don't notice that mainline leak right away, because that water is just going to keep running and keep running. It's going to show up in your meter on your leak detector little triangle when you go out and look at the meter. That's a mainline leak. When you talk to an irrigator about a leak in your yard, they may say, what I always ask is it leaking actively, or does it just leak when the zone comes on? And that's what will tell me if it's more than likely a lateral leak or more than likely a mainline leak. Now, the mainline leak obviously is sort of a bigger emergency than a lateral line leak, but they're both really important to keep those pipes in good repair, because any break in the line not only wastes water, but it also introduces debris into the line. When the system shuts off, there's a little bit of siphonage that happens through that leak, and all the dirt and mud and stuff gets potentially pulled back into that pipe. Then the next time it comes on, that debris is going to get pushed to your emitter and get stuck in your nozzle, and then you're going to have a clogged nozzle. So the water pattern is going to be distorted. You're probably going to get a dry spot, and it's going to cause more problems. The other thing that's really important to remember when you're making repairs to pipes, you want to flush them out for that same reason. You don't want to fix a pipe in one area and it just creates a debris problem in another area, because you'll have to call that irrigator back and say, now I've got a problem here. And one thing I will say about irrigation problems and the sequence in which they happen, a lot of times if you go and fix one repair, it reveals a repair downstream. And so if you have multiple breaks in your system, sometimes it's not evident until you fix one, and then you see another break downstream. So pipes and fittings are important. A couple other things I'll just point out on this picture. You can see our fittings here. We've got a T, we've got a 90. Again, little tiny pieces of plastic. They're not that expensive, but knowing when to use the right one can mean the difference between, a continued problem and a problem solved. Most PVC in the ground in North Texas is class 200. Schedule 40 PVC is, if you buy your pipe from Home Depot, or your irrigator does, sometimes they might use Schedule 40. It's more expensive, so most irrigation repairs are done with class 200. You might have copper in the ground still if you have an old system. It lasts a long time, so it's very possible that if your system is older, you'll have copper. And we still run across galvanized pipe in the ground, and I put oh my, because it is definitely a challenge. It can get rusted out, and if it starts to rust, then you just have leak upon leak upon leak upon leak, because all of that rust just slowly creates those leaks. And then you've got to deal with the connection between good galvanized and some other material. You don't want to ever retrofit back to galvanized, so you got to pay attention to what that is. If you have galvanized pipe in your system, just get you a piggy bank and start putting nickels in it, because ultimately someday that's all going to have to come out. Here's another good example of valves in the ground. Now, I will say that in the North Texas irrigation world, we would call this a Yankee system, because all of the valves are there together. And up north, they typically put all the valves in line together. And we call that a manifold. So those valves all put together as a manifold. What is more common in North Texas is that they place the valve kind of in the center of the area that is served by the valve. So if you have a zone in the backyard, you'll have a zone valve buried in the ground somewhere in the backyard. If you have a side yard zone, that valve is probably going to be somewhere in the side yard area. Your valve for your front yard is going to be somewhere usually in the front area. Now, I believe in the city of Frisco, they are tending more towards this sort of design where the valves are all there together. So you can see this is our main line coming in here. They've teed off to multiple zones. Here's all of the valves. They're all wired up, and you can see there's wire putting them together as well. And then this pipe that's coming out from each valve is our lateral line. It's going down the road to the emitters, and that's what this looks like. Ultimately, this would probably be put in 2 or 3 jumbo valve boxes. So all this pipe will be covered up. You open that valve box, you'll just see this one little valve. If they use those little 6-inch green round boxes, they would just have one for each one. They might put a big fat box for 2 valves or 2 valves. So typically these are parts of the system that you just never see because, you know, they get buried. Our technicians take pictures of everything. When they dig something up, they'll take a photo just to show the homeowner, this is what it looks like under here. And, you know, this is the mess that we had to deal with. So, we're back to our irrigation diagram here. And, I'm also running out of time. So I'm going to move on. We've talked a little bit about efficiency options. We've talked a little bit about backflow prevention. A backflow prevention device is required by law, and it does protect our water supply. There's different types. In North Texas, mostly we're looking at double check valves, and those are typically really close to your meter. They're the first component downstream from your meter. Right after that backflow prevention device, if you have a master valve, it'll typically be right there in line with the main line. And a master valve, what a master valve does is it kills water to your entire system when the system is not running. So that makes the challenge of a main line lessened because your meter's not going to run all night long with your leak. It's gonna be cut off by that master valve. Mainline leaks are still a problem, but that's a master valve can definitely help. All right, let's talk about briefly electricity in the system. I talked about that people understand the electricity part of a system the least, but a wire runs from your controller to every zone in your system. Okay, now, a lot of times it follows in the same trench as your pipe, because when they install it, it's open, they put everything in the trench and then they cover it up. However, if you've added a zone later, or the homeowner before you added a zone later, or had to move a zone to make room for a deck or a swimming pool, electrical wire could be anywhere in your yard. That's my basic point. So not only is there a zone wire to every valve, but there's also a common wire to every valve. And wires can get cut during construction or planting. So if you have a zone that doesn't run, it's typically because there's a problem with the electricity. If that wire's been cut, that zone valve is not going to come on. So it's important to know where your lines are. If you have to run a new wire to something in the field, it's important that you kind of know where it is so that the next time you're putting in a garden or planting a shrub or getting a dog watch fence, those wires don't get cut. One thing that I always recommend to people is if you're planting anything in your irrigation system, have in your yard, have your irrigator come out first. It's not intuitive for people to do that. They want to call us in once they know something's wrong. But we encourage all of our clients, if you're putting in some new shrubs, if you're putting in a new fence, whatever you're doing, have us come in first. We can go, oh, this is the area that you're working in. Well, here's your wires. You've got heads here. We're going to go ahead and cut those off. Let your landscape guy come in and do his thing. We'll come back and put everything back. It's a lot cheaper that way. It's a lot cheaper than getting a whole landscape installed and you go to turn it on and nothing works. Because what am I going to come around and dig around and try to find the problem in your brand new, beautiful landscape? So I always encourage people to check out these things first. before you do a project. And here it is, right in black and white. Tracing that water path before a construction project can save big, big money. Controllers, we're going to breeze through controllers because I know I'm running out of time. And when you tune in on April 8th, I'm going to talk all about controllers. We're going to talk about different kinds of controllers. We're going to talk about creating a good, efficient landscape watering schedule. So, but what I want you to know about controllers today is definitely they're the brains of the system, but they're only as smart as the guy that's putting the instructions in. So if you have a good irrigator or landscaper who's conscious about water and conscientious about using water in an efficient way, then you're going to be good as gold with a smart controller or a dumb one. Okay. A lot of people, are worried about getting a smart controller, but you can do smart things with a regular controller as well. And that's the things we're going to talk about on April 8th. Some irrigators call them a clock. I've also heard them called a timer. That's typically up north. They call them a timer, or you call it a controller. We'll talk a little bit more about controller advanced features in our class coming up on April the 8th. Additional components that I want you to know about are rain and freeze sensors. Those are required by most cities, including Dallas, as I am sure. They work great for a while. They do require maintenance, and they typically don't have a super long life. So rain freeze sensors are really simple machines. Most of them are basically wine corks in a column. When the wine corks get wet, they get fat and they cut off the connection so your system doesn't water. When those wine corks dry back up and shrink back down, your connection is restored. Over time in our hot, humid Texas summers, those wine corks get hydrophobic. They lose their ability to really absorb. What that means is you got to get a lot of water on them in order to activate them, or you need to get lots of slow rain in order to get those corks fat enough to cut off the water. So we typically dial ours down to the lowest setting so that they'll cut off with the least amount of water. And that's a regular maintenance item that when we go look at a client, we check out their rain freeze sensor to make sure that they're working. They're also not super expensive. They shouldn't be super expensive. They're the number one thing to help you save water when we've got rain coming in. Also, remote controls, we'll talk a little bit more about that. All right. We've talked a little bit about specialty nozzles, and I've talked to you about, just putting new nozzles. Those are good options to save water. Check valves go in the bottom of a head to retain water in the line when that zone shuts off. So you don't have water running out of that lowest head, creating a puddle at the bottom of the hill. And that it's also emptying out that entire lateral line in between water run times. So check valves are important. If you do a pressure regulated head, check valves are always an option on there. Tell them you want PRS, CV heads, and then you'll be covered with both sets of technology. Smart controllers, which we'll talk about. Polymers are absorbent dust or crystals that you can put in areas where it's difficult to water, like patio pots, that when you water once or twice a week, that those polymers absorb the water and slowly release them so that you can overcome some of your irrigation challenges with water times using polymers. And of course, I'm a big proponent of mulch, mulch, mulch. So we're just finishing up here because I want to leave at least a few minutes if there's any questions. So maintenance, all irrigation requires maintenance. Maintenance is the number one area where people can improve their irrigation relationship and the number one area that will save you water. So, maintenance can be as simple as turning your sprinkler zones on a Saturday so you can walk around in your flip-flops and make sure nothing's leaking. Or it could be setting up a regular inspection schedule with your irrigation professional so that they call you, every other month or 4 times a year and say, hey, we're going to come check out your sprinkler system. Also, your irrigation components wear out just like any other component in any kind of mechanical system that you have. Eventually, your oil filter is going to wear out. Eventually, your brake pads are going to have to be replaced in your car. Irrigation systems are no different. Their components typically last longer than a lot of things that we think about putting maintenance to, but every part on your irrigation system someday will have to be improved or replaced. So troubleshooting, I'll cover some more about troubleshooting when we're talking about controllers, but the main point I would like to make is avoid the trouble if you can. Have that irrigator come out and take a look at whatever kind of project you're starting. I would say that I would hesitate to just think that the landscape person is going to do it, because a lot of times they are single-minded and what they're thinking about is plants, how many they're going to sell you, how many you need in this area, and how they're going to get them in the ground. And irrigation is a lot of times secondary to them, but homeowners think that they're thinking about both things. So then they spend all their money on a landscape project, and then the landscaper gets his money and goes on down the road, and then they are left with an irrigation problem. And they've already spent all their money on plants. And so they're in a bind. And then I have to come and deliver the bad news that they're going to have to spend even more money to fix the irrigation. Having your irrigator in early will save money. But I tell my clients, whatever kind of project you're planning in your yard, add 20% for potential irrigation changes. It's a good rule of thumb. Just plan on it. If it's a $10,000 landscape project, just go ahead and budget 12 so you'll be ready for those irrigation issues when they happen. Don't be afraid to call for backup. We'll talk a little bit more about troubleshooting. Man, I ate up that time like a birthday cake, but let's see if there's any questions in the chat. I'll be happy to answer them. We have about 5 minutes. That my contact information is there. There's my email, our office phone, and we do have a Facebook page. And so you're welcome to follow us on Facebook. I'll be back on April 8th with some troubleshooting and controller information, and I'll be happy to answer any questions we have.
Thank you, Amanda. That was so informative, and you're right, it does help demystify, because when we're not used to seeing something, we're not comfortable working on it, or sometimes even understanding more about it. So thank you for introducing us to our irrigation systems and making us realize that, just like you said, like your car, they need maintenance and things wear out and stuff like that. And so I'm inspired to, work on my irrigation system. And so speaking of which, some of these things you talked about, like switching out the nozzles, is that something I could do myself, or should I hire a professional to do that?
Absolutely. Nozzle upgrades or nozzle changeouts in particular are really easy to do. You have to find your heads. You need to know where they are. You can hold the stem of the head up, unscrew that nozzle. There should be a filter inside. And it's always interesting to pull that nozzle off and take a look at the filter. If it's full of debris, then you know that it's definitely time to change that filter. That filter's doing its job, but you'll want to be sure and put a filter back with the nozzle. That is easy to do, just as a civilian. You don't have to be an irrigation professional. Now, the challenge is knowing the right nozzle to pick. There's a lot of online resources that can talk to you about nozzle choice, or do some measuring and see what options are out there.
All right. That's good to know, because I think when we feel empowered to do something ourselves, it has a lot more value to us, and we're going to take more care of it. All right, yes. So we had another good question. How do you find an affordable irrigation professional that is knowledgeable in retrofitting older sprinklers, systems, and upgrades?
Good question. The Dallas Irrigation Association has a wonderful website where you can put in your city or your zip code, and they'll give you a list of Dallas Irrigation Association members who are licensed irrigators and that service your area. I would call and just be upfront with them that you're interested in water saving options, or you're interested in a water efficiency inspection, and just visit with the person that answers the phone. If they're not enthusiastic about water savings, then you might kind of get the vibe that you need to interview another one. But irrigators are a lot more educated about water conserving options now. So, having them out to take a look at it, they should be able to provide you a good plan of things to do to save water. And then you can decide which things you want to hire them to do and which things you want to try to do yourself. Look for a license, definitely. It's required in the state of Texas. And then those additional certifications like EPA WaterSense Partner, there's a lot of certified auditors in Texas. Those things will let you know that they've had more than just the basic training on water efficiency.
All right. Thank you. And it's great to know that there is a licensing agency to make sure that irrigators are, doing good methods and up to date on the latest technology, because this is a field that employs a lot of technology. Okay, so we have a question. And if I am not saying your question correctly, please retype it into the chat. But I believe this is about, like, if you don't have an irrigation system and you want to get one, what do you do first? Do you install your irrigation first, or do you put your landscape in first?
Well, I'm a big proponent of planning both projects, but doing the irrigation first. The reason you want to do the irrigation first is because it's the dirty job, right? It's the digging the hole, it's trenching. You want to do that with your landscape plan in mind so that you put in the right system for the right location. But definitely I recommend doing the irrigation first, especially if you're starting from scratch on a yard that doesn't have anything yet. Definitely plan where your landscape is going to go so that the irrigator knows, what zones he needs to plan for. And then do the irrigation first. That Dallas Irrigation Association website, I believe, allows you to filter for installation contractors versus service or repair contractors. So you definitely want to look for an irrigator that does installations, and then ask them about water saving technology, because they may default to giving you the cheapest option instead of the option that's going to save you more money and water over time. So ask them for those water conservation upgrades and evaluate the bids.
That is really, really good advice. All right, so we're getting ready to wrap up. And okay, so I have a question.
All right.
All right, so you mentioned different kinds of moisture meters, like the ones that shut off, like they shut off your system if it's raining. Is there a soil moisture sensor that is available for irrigation systems? Because some lawns, really, we are allowed to water twice a week, but some lawns only need to be watered once a week.
Yes, there are soil moisture meters. There's a lot of soil moisture meters that you just put into your different landscape areas and look at the meter yourself. Some brand of controllers have soil moisture sensors that will talk back to the controller. So, the irrigation controller won't come on Tuesday if that soil moisture sensor is saying, hey, we're good, we've got plenty of moisture. Those are typically a little more expensive, and there's some debate in the irrigation world whether one moisture sensor is enough for an entire yard, especially if you have some slope in the yard. So I would say that's definitely a more advanced component, and most homeowner residential systems aren't going to have that as an option. Some of them do, and you can definitely ask about it. They're definitely there, and the technology has improved on them greatly. They used to be really persnickety, and but I would definitely say that's an advanced feature.
All right, I've always wondered that. So thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to when you come back and visit us in April. So remember, we have part 2 with Amanda in early April. Registration will open for that soon. So keep your eyes on that Green Dallas social media we have, and we will have those notifications to let you know when you can register for that. And everybody who pre-registered for this session is going to get an email in a couple of days. That's going to have information that Amanda's going to share and also a link for this recording. And this recording will be on the Dallas Public Library's YouTube page, so you can refer back to it. You can share it with your friends and neighbors and family so that everybody can get smart on their outdoor services. And with that, last reminder to send your name and mailing address to greendallas@dallascityhall.com for your free thank you gift. And on behalf of Amanda, the Dallas Public Library, and Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability, we want to thank you so very much for spending your time with us today. And we hope to see you soon on our next program, Earth Day Every Day in 1 week. So thank you all and stay safe.
Bye, everybody.